In enterprise cybersecurity, zero risk is a mathematical impossibility. Every system begins with a baseline level of exposure to threats before any safeguards are applied. This is inherent risk. Organizations implement mitigation controls, such as firewalls and security policies, to reduce this inherent baseline. According to NIST and CISSP standards, the portion of risk that remains after these measures are applied is the residual risk. This creates a linear relationship. Subtract the impact of your mitigation controls from your inherent risk, and the remainder is your residual risk. Management navigates residual risk as a baseline business reality rather than a technical failure of the security team. Businesses establish a risk appetite to define the broad level of remaining risk they are prepared to absorb in pursuit of their objectives. Once a residual risk is formally accepted, it requires continuous monitoring to ensure it stays within tolerable bounds.
The 2017 Equifax data breach resulted from an unmonitored residual software vulnerability that eventually exposed the sensitive personal data of 147 million people. When residual risk materializes into a breach of this scale, organizations face hundreds of millions in settlements and regulatory penalties. Determining the correct response to these risks depends on whether you are managing information technology, or IT, or operational technology, or OT. Calculating acceptable residual risk depends on whether the asset is a digital database or physical infrastructure. Consider an internet-facing web application that processes sensitive financial data. Constant exposure to DDoS attacks and web exploits gives this asset a high inherent risk classification. The expected impact of a breach in this environment involves data theft, privacy violations, and direct financial loss. The IT team mitigates this by applying web application firewalls and multi-factor authentication. These controls bring the residual risk down to moderate, though vulnerabilities like zero-day exploits could still allow an attacker to bypass defenses. This chart compares the cost of new controls against the annualized loss expectancy, or ALE. If a security control costs more than the financial loss it is designed to prevent, implementing it is an irrational business decision. CISSP standards state that management should accept this residual risk when further mitigation is no longer cost-effective. The organization then relies on key risk indicators to monitor this accepted risk for any change in the threat environment. In IT, residual risk is a calculation of dollars and data, solved when exposure aligns with a budget. Operational technology is fundamentally different. It involves highly kinetic, physical systems, where the real-world stakes go far beyond the loss of digital records. This $250 million industrial manufacturing turbine is managed by an industrial control system. Cyber incidents in an OT environment translate directly into physical equipment destruction and environmental hazards. These impact criteria for industrial environments explicitly include health and human safety. Because a malicious command could remove safety limits and trigger an explosion, the inherent risk is critical. OT mitigation relies on strict network segmentation and manual engineering overrides. These controls are managed by on-site engineers who rely on analog dials to monitor the system's physical state. Despite these controls, residual risk remains high because catastrophic physical failure cannot be completely engineered away. Human safety requirements prevent management from simply accepting this level of residual risk. Management must instead transfer the financial portion through insurance or defer operations until physical upgrades are completed. Human safety creates a fixed ceiling for what an OT business can accept. You cannot budget away the loss of a life. IT and OT methodologies both follow a universal framework for handling residual risk. Mitigating implements controls to lower a threat's impact. Transferring shifts the financial burden to a third party, like purchasing insurance. Avoiding eliminates the risk entirely by stopping the activity. Accepting is the documented decision to absorb the remaining risk. Selecting the correct treatment for each asset is the core responsibility of a security leader. These decisions are tracked in the risk register, an executive ledger that maps residual risks to their specific treatments. NIST and ISO standards require accepted residual risks to be authorized by executives with appropriate authority. Risk management frameworks require executive-level accountability for every accepted risk. When leadership fails to acknowledge the true scale of their residual exposure,
The resulting fallout becomes a matter of institutional survival. Left unmanaged, residual risk cascades rapidly through interconnected corporate systems and complex global supply chains, ultimately compounding into massive, uncontrollable systemic failure. Mature cybersecurity functions as a system for mathematically reducing inherent dangers to a level the business can survive. This alignment allows organizations to innovate in a dangerous world while maintaining their appetite for growth.